Do you think there's stigma surrounding musicians talking about money and
Yes.
business and
Yes.
those sort of things openly? Why do you
We're
think
just
that is?
we're just freaking terrible. So as a blanket statement, I would say that everybody's sort of like personal framing of how they think about money is kind of fucked.
I wanted to start by asking you, what was the first money you ever made as a musician, do you think?
Oh my God, as a musician, the first money I was working in a theatre. So I was working as an apprentice bass maker. So I was making basses in the town that I was born in the north of England, in Carlisle, which is, if any like Game of Thrones fans, I was basically on the wall, and so and it's exactly like it was in the series. So I was there, and a bass player turned up at the workshop, and he had some health issues and needed a sub for a gig. He was like, "I'm desperate to find a sub for the gig. I play in a theatre. It's all charted out. Do you know anybody?" Not to me. He was asking my boss at the time, and my boss was
Yeah.
like, "He plays a bit of bass." So I ended up on that gig. So I ended up working in
Wow.
this. Yeah, for like I think I did it for like a week or a couple of weeks or something like that. And it was actually in that moment I was like, holy shit, I think I need to become a musician. This is great, because it was way easier than making basses like sawdust and freaking jigsaws and things that can like cut your fingers off. It's not great. And I was on this gig and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And so yeah, so that was the first time I made any money as a musician.
That's cool. So how old were you then? Was that like late teens, early 20s kind of thing?
Yeah, no, like 17, 18, 17,
Okay.
18.
After that, like, was that kind of your main focus? Like you were trying to do gigs and that sort of thing? Like,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, before SBL sort of took off, like what was your primary source of income, I guess, as a musician
Yeah,
in the early
so
days?
yeah, after that, I moved down to Leeds, which is a bigger city, obviously, than where I was living at the time. So I moved down to Leeds, more stuff going on here, but pretty much straight away, I actually did that. Ended up on that theatre gig for about a year in the end because the guy couldn't
Nice.
continue. So I got that gig. After that, I then went on the cruise ships for a while,
Oh,
which was
cool.
great. That was a wild time, as you can imagine. Sort of like 20 years old. It was amazing, and did that for a year or so, and then after that just came back to Leeds and kind of just became a sort of like gigging musician, really, just sort of like gigging about, doing corporate events, weddings, um, doing tours, like theatre stuff, like basically stereotypical sort of like just jobbing musician. uh,
Nice.
and that really lasted for right up until really my sort of like late 20s, really. And um and then in amongst it, it's worth saying as well, while I was doing that, I cottoned on that you could actually make more money by running your own sort of like corporate event bands. So my partner at the time, who's now my wife, we set up our own band that was doing corporate events and stuff like that, and we ran that for about 3 or 4 years as well, which was way more lucrative than just being a
Hmm.
jobbing musician. So I was sort of like gigging around, doing theatres and shows and stuff like that. But
Sure.
at the same time, I was running this sort of like corporate events thing as well, which was really cool. And then basically, when was it, like 20, like 12, 13 years ago? I'm trying to work out. So like when I got into my sort of like early 30s, basically, I'd had sort of like issues with my hands, sort of like
Mm.
movement issues, like various sort of like things. And it turned out that it was something called focal dystonia. So I had to take 6 months off playing to try and recover from that, which ultimately never happened. It's You can't really recover from it.
Right.
And but in that 6 months of, I was sort of like not gigging, couldn't play. I was like, shit, what am I going to do? Uh, I tell a lie. I could play a little bit. I could play for like, 10 minutes, 20 minutes max at a time if it
Hmm.
was like pretty light. So I could teach. So I was doing a bit of teaching at the time. And at that moment, a friend of mine said, have you heard of this thing called YouTube? And I was like,
Hmm.
I've never even heard of YouTube. What is YouTube? And he was like, oh, it's this cool website. You can watch it on it. I was like, all right. So I didn't have a computer at the time. So I went around to the local internet cafe and asked the guy there, I was like, how do I get onto this thing called YouTube? And he was like, all right. So he like showed me how to, and I kid you not, I just, was barely, couldn't do anything online. and he showed me it, and I was like, all right. So I sat there for half an hour watching some videos,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, I wonder if anybody's teaching bass online. So I did a search, and there was like two or three people in the world. Guy called Marlo DK, a guy called his real name's Thomas.
Yeah.
He was like maybe the first bass guy on YouTube, and then an Australian guy, and that was it. And I was like,
That's
oh well, maybe if
unreal.
yeah. And at the time, I was trying to get people to opt into to lessons with me, so I could like pay the rent and shit like that. And I thought, well, if I put lessons on this thing called YouTube, maybe they will find me and get Skype lessons with me. And so I was like, okay, I need to do that. So literally, like within a few days, bought a computer, bought bought a flip camera, and started uploading lessons onto
Oh
YouTube.
man, that's just
And
so
yeah,
unreal. Like having kind of got in so early, I guess, like when there was literally no one doing it. It's just wild. And actually I
yeah,
was looking at obviously your channel, like if you go back to the oldest videos, it's like, man, you've been you've been doing it. You've been doing the thing like for so long. It's really
yeah.
amazing to see what you've built. So when you started on YouTube, did you set out like, were you like, this is a sort of a business opportunity? And it sounds like you were setting it up with that in mind from the very beginning.
Yes, kind of. It wasn't like I actually didn't know it was any kind of opportunity. I guess the sort of like important context is that even when I went to work as like an apprentice guitar maker, bass maker, I did that, and I got that job when I was like early, like just turned 17. And when I went and did that, I never did that in with the thought of like, oh, I'm going to work for this guy forever. I did it in terms of I'm going to learn the skills, then I'm going to set up my own business. That was always the path. So it was always kind of I don't know how it happened because my parents are not entrepreneurial at all. They were always skint. So maybe that was it. Maybe I was like,
Yeah,
shit, I need to make some money.
yeah. Can
You know
relate
what
to
I
that.
mean? So,
Yeah.
so maybe it came from that, but I always had that sort of like entrepreneurial kind of like itch that I wanted to go and do something. I wanted, I guess I wanted control over my own destiny. So when I just started doing the YouTube stuff, I didn't see any business opportunity at all. I was kind of just desperate to get students, but within the first year or so, I'd gone from doing Skype lessons. Maybe I gave a few people some Skype lessons. I was like, okay, this actually sucks. Maybe I should do correspondence lessons because Skype was terrible at the time. There was like massive delays. It's not like
Yeah,
Zoom,
yeah.
right? It's like you said something and then they'd hear it like 6 seconds afterwards, kind of vibe.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
great for teaching. So I was like, maybe I should do correspondence lessons because I'd seen some guys in Berkeley, some of the tutors over there doing correspondence lessons where you send tapes back and forward. And I was like, maybe we could send downloads to each other. I did that. That was a grind. I was like, this isn't great. So I'm trying to figure out the business model. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Sure.
is there something? I'm not really sure there's a business model there. I don't even know what the word business model means at that time. I'm like, but
Yeah.
maybe there's something there. And then I was watching a friend of mine. I was watching a YouTube video. I was searching his channel, and he'd watched a video called. You used to be able to see what other people had watched, and it said that he'd watched a video. Yeah, it said that he's watched this video called "How to Build an Online Business" by a guy called Brendan Burchard. I was like, oh, right, okay, so I watched this video, and it was like it was like, I don't know, like 60 or 90 minutes or something like that. Got to the end of it, and I was like, and basically I was like, oh shit, this seems like I could do this kind of thing. And
Totally.
essentially what the video said is build an email list, sell products and programs, digital products and programs to the email list. And also you can layer coaching on top of that. So I was like, huh, okay. So it gave me, that was the first insight into any kind of like true business model it was. And so I bought this guy's book, which obviously I was in his book funnel at that time. Hey, and I didn't know that at the time. I bought his book. And I just, went really down the rabbit hole with that kind of thing, and that led me to if there's anybody old school like marketers listen to this, that led me into the world of Brendan Bashard, Jeff Walker, who did Product Launch Formula, Joe Polish back in the day when he was teaching like online marketing to carpet cleaners. Frank Kern. Do you know Frank Kern? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like Frank Kern. You know, like that first kind of like layer of like
Yeah.
online marketers, which was wild. And I was like, and that's when really things sort of like drastically changed for me. And I put together an email list off the back of that video I watched and sold a program. And prior to that, I think I'd been working and I'd maybe made, I don't know, like, $1,000 in a year or something, maybe not even that over an entire year. And then I put an email list together and then did like a mini like email launch to this list, and I
Yeah.
made $1,000 in a day, and my
Right.
mind just like fucking flipped. I was like, "What is
That's
even
great.
going on? This is incredible!" Yeah, and that was the
Yeah.
start of it. Yeah,
So it sounds like you didn't necessarily set out with the intention to do that, but it kind of snuck up on you. And I guess it was a bit of a perfect storm of your entrepreneurial sort of endeavors, but then also, I mean, just the platforms being so raw at that time. Like it's just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think it's much easier than it is now. I think, it's in
I
a
think
sense.
so. I think so. I don't. There's more now to. I think it was easier in a way, but the hard thing about it is there was nobody to model. You know what I mean? It
Sure.
was like
Yeah. Everyone was shooting in the dark, kind of.
everybody was shooting in the. I was
Yeah.
like uploading a video a month, and I felt like I was like on fire. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
working it, like with my video a month. And to be honest with you, I'll tell you what, them first videos, I can remember getting my one video to get like 600 views. I can remember freaking out when it got 600 views, and I'd been doing it for like a year at that point. So my first videos were like getting like, I don't know, like 50 views, 100 views,
Yeah.
and I was working hard. I was like posting the video, then I get the video and I go onto forums and I'd share the video, and I'd be helping out in those communities completely free, helping out, answering questions. Hey, check my video out here. This will help you out to do that. I was making videos for the people in the forums, posting them on YouTube. So I was like really networking hard online in terms of all of the online communities and creating video content for them and posting them in all over. So I was like at it. So it was
Yeah.
easier, but I think that it was easier, but I think that like I could still like I think if you took everything away from me right now, I could figure out how to grow like a 50 to 100,000 person YouTube, yeah, 50 to 100K YouTube subs. I'd like to think that I could do that in under 2 years.
Yeah, well, I was also going to say
Now,
it's
yeah.
definitely not to downplay your input in achieving that. It's just the landscape is very different, and that's a really good point that you make about like not having people to model.
Yeah.
I'm really interested. You have always had this kind of entrepreneurial business mindset, right? Always, it seems. Did you ever feel like it was pulling you away from your identity as a musician, or did you see those things kind of coexisting, or did you not really think about it?
Like, so, well, yes, and so I had like an incredible forcing function. I got this thing called focal dystonia, which is like a neurological disorder that affects my hands, and that was kind of the forcing function. It was like, oh, you can't gig anymore. So now I've learned since I've learned how to navigate around it. So I can gig now. I'm sort of like gigging, and I do have that conflict now, interestingly. So yes, now I have that conflict. Now I actually really feel the pull between the sort of like the business and the education and the music side. So I really feel like that's sort of like that constant kind of friction between the two. But when I began the business, like 13, 14 years ago, whatever, I didn't feel it so much then because my psychological state at that time was like loss. I just lost this. I'd been sort of like working on this thing, like my playing from, when I was like, a teenager until like when I was like early 30s. I've been, and really taking it seriously. Like I was traveling all the way, traveling around the world, getting lessons from people. Like I was like a super dedicated student, and I
Mm,
felt like that had been taken away from me when I got this focal dystonia diagnosis. So actually, when I found business and online, I was just in the perfect mental state to get really seriously focused about it. I
mm.
basically got all of that nerdy musician side of me and just sort of like and just
Yeah,
focused
yeah,
on something different. I was like
yeah.
lost for a little while for 6 months trying to find my feet because I was like, what am I supposed to do with all of this freaking nerdy energy I've got? And then
Mm,
suddenly I found a new thing and just the eye of Sauron just moved over there and just like,
yeah, yeah. Do you think there's stigma surrounding musicians talking around about money and
yes,
business and
yes.
those sort of things openly? Why do you
Which
think
is
that is?
which is freaking terrible. I think culturally, um, so oh, it's really complex. I think that depending on what type of music it is and what genre you're like living within, I think that it's different. So, um, so depending on what world you exist within, I think that musical world that you existed in, it will be different. If you're from sort of like a jobbing musician background, do you know what I mean? Sort of like if
Hmm.
you're sort of like in the jazz world, for instance,
Yeah.
like man, like they really care about the art of it, and
Hmm.
and really sort of like anything that gets in the way of the art is in many ways I think in direct conflict with the art itself. So I think that, and that's gone on for many years culturally within that, and that makes it complex, and that's fine. I actually, the way that I'm kind of romantic about it. I think that there's so many great jazz players that I've met that actually sort of like sacrifice their money for the art. They like love the art so much. They're like, I can't live. I'd rather live without money than the art. And I just think
Yeah.
that that's kind of cool. Now I also think just as a and to that, I think that there probably are other incredible ways that them musicians could be making money and not having to feel guilty about it. So it's complex. Whereas if you go into different musical areas, like I think that session players that are working at the highest levels, I know a few of my friends are working for like massive artists, and they will talk about money pretty openly. But blanket statement, yes, money. Like musicians feel weird about money because I think that culturally, it it's a complex thing to talk about with each other. Everybody feels slightly embarrassed about it. People feel like they're asking too much. They don't value their time enough. They've got no frame of reference for how much like value they like what they bring as a musician. So yeah, just sort of like so as a blanket statement, I would say that everybody's sort of like um personal framing of how they think about money is kind of I would
Yeah.
that's the starting point. If I was
Yeah.
starting to talk to a musician about money, I would, in most circumstances, I would think to myself, oh, their thought process, their thinking around money is probably like, yeah,
You're right in that there is a bit of an almost shame mentality
yeah,
around like not feeling confident in the value. I think the main thing is that musicians don't understand their own value that they provide. So they
yeah,
undershoot more often than not.
yeah,
But then also there's this kind of, you may or may not agree with this, but a bit of a crabs in the bucket mentality of like, as soon as you try to go like, nah, like I'm gonna charge more. I'm gonna charge more for my lessons, or I'm gonna create a product. It's like you get sort of othered a little bit. But when I started doing that, my mentality was like, guys, like we can all do this. Like you can, if I
yes,
can charge this for lessons, like you can as well. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but it doesn't seem to be how it's met. I don't know. That's just my own
No,
experience
you're
with
no,
that.
you're right. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
think like if somebody's like, how much? Most of the conversations I have when I'm like, how much are you charging? Like, let's say lessons, for instance, it always ends with me saying, you should charge more. Like you're undercharging. Most people are like undercharging because they feel sort of like embarrassed about it or whatever, because they haven't been given the right set of tools of how to think about money and their value specifically. And then also they just, a lot of people are, what's the word? Unexperienced when it comes to business. So they might be charging for lessons and they just think, oh, I'm just going to charge the same as everybody else. Or I'll charge a little bit cheaper than everybody. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, and that's just a
totally.
race in the bottom. So they don't understand. It's not intuitive for them to understand how to position themselves as being different, and how that's really important. So I think that it's a lot of it is just sort of, they just don't have the skills yet to think that through and have the yeah, it's a tricky one.
What are your thoughts about the music industry as a way to make a decent living today in 2026?
I think it depends. I think that it's really good. I think it's really good, but I think that you have to be incredibly savvy and ideally you're gonna have a depends what era you've been born in. If you're an older, and I would say sort of like myself and older, if you're one of the older, like, and I'm like 47, but maybe like, let's say you're 50 or 55 or 60, those guys, there's some incredible musicians out there that actually did financially pretty well back in the day who are struggling now. And it's because the business model changed so drastically. For younger people, I think that for younger people or older people as well who have the ability to kind of sort of like switch the frame in a little bit and understand sort of like what the new business models are, I think that that's incredible opportunity actually, because what it's happened is everything's been sort of like all of the gates have been taken down. There's no gatekeepers anymore. You can go and do it yourself. But in that, I think that sometimes what makes people great musicians doesn't make them great at business. So, and I think that music and business are, even though they live in the same space, they're two separate things. So you have great musicians that actually struggle sometimes on the business side of things. That said, like my headline would be, I think it's good. I think it's good right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people that want to create their own brands, their own projects, to build audiences. Like you couldn't do any of that before. Right now,
Yeah.
as a musician, you can build yourself as, you really are a brand. That's what you are. You are sort of like an individual on the internet. And when people look at you, they will get like an internal feeling. And that feeling is your brand. You know what I mean? Whether
Totally.
you like to call it a brand or not. So you're the sort of like, and then you can build an audience around that. And then you can, sell products and programs to that, whether that's sort of like albums or limited edition recordings or vinyl or educational products or coaching or in-person retreats. Like all of that shit is wide open right now and it didn't exist before. So I think it's great if the individual is right.
So what advice would you have to someone like let's say a younger person that's getting started right now? Like, is there something specific that pops out to you that you're like, you have to be doing this?
Yeah, you have to be, a few things. You have to be building an online presence in some way, shape, or form. So that for most people would be somewhere like Instagram or something like that, because it's going to give you a couple of things. It's going to give you a way to share your musical self with people that are like out there in the world, other than sort of like your direct sort of like community, right? So it gets you out there so people can watch you play. And I think that that's really good and don't get me wrong, there are downsides from social media, big time. But still, if I'm talking to somebody that's sort of like early 20s or early 30s, whatever, if you want to do this as a musician, I think that building an online presence is really important, because it's going to help you attract people into your world that wouldn't even know you exist. And also it's going to fucking put you under the gun as well. Do shit. Stop sort of like wishing away the day. Do you know what I mean? Like actually,
Totally.
and also do something unique. Do
Yeah.
something that's different. You don't want to be like just blending in with everybody else. What's going to make you stand out? So I think that all of that's really important. And building that social media following is like, that's your audience. It's your, as Kevin Kelly said, your 1,000 true fans back in the day when he wrote that great essay. It's building an audience that give a shit about what you want. And
Mm.
then after that, well, then you can do what you want off it. You can collaborate with other musicians. You might want to start a band. I would recommend starting your own project, or find a group of friends that you want to start a project in, rather than waiting for somebody to sort of like give you a call and you're wandering around holding your umbilical cord out like to plug it into the nearest freaking parent. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
start
yeah.
your own shit, get it together. Either it's yours or it's sort of like a little group of you who've got something together. Have a project again that showcases what you do. Also, that'll stretch you as a musician, and then learn about like the online world. How do you actually sort of like, how do you exist in this new world? What do you do? If you've got a band, are you going to put some like retreats together? All of that shit. And then I'd also say, not to go too far down the sort of like the business rabbit hole, and all of so many like musicians might be enjoying it up until this point, but they might be like find a little bit distaste in this next thing that I'm going to say. But build an email list. Build an
Yeah.
email list. It's really important
Hmm.
because, listen, if you were a record company and you were, just to sort of like change the frame a little bit, if you were a record company, not that you would want to be right now, but let's just hypothetically use this as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
hypothetical, right? So you're a record company. You wouldn't just build your social media following on Instagram, would you? You'd have them on Instagram, and then you would offer them things to get their email, right? And you'd build a database of emails, and that
Mm.
means Instagram changes or whatever social media platform changes, you've got all of your contacts that the people that followed you on that platform, you've got like a good portion of them on an email list. So then if you go to another social media platform in the future, or you've got gigs coming up or
Mm.
whatever, you can communicate that with your email list rather than solely relying on telling people through Instagram. So it would be, start building your social media, take it freaking seriously,
Mm.
be different. Like, like start your own
Mm.
project, be involved in other people's projects, collaborate with people, stop dicking about.
Yeah, get it done.
Yeah, get it done, create an email list. And don't be like, hey, join my email list. How about giving people value? Say, hey, jump onto my weekly newsletter or monthly newsletter. You can call it a different thing from a newsletter if you want. You can be like, hey, download my free album over here. Something
Hmm.
to exchange for that email list. So you've got two channels. You've got your main social media channel, which is probably Instagram, and then you've got your email list as well.
I definitely agree with you that I think something of a theme that I'm seeing come up a lot is like the argument as to whether or not you should be on social media is kind of over. It's like you
Yeah.
have to do that. It's not even like it's not 5 or 10 years ago now where we're still sitting around talking about whether or not you should be building a social media following. It's like it's kind of a must now in our
Yeah.
industry in our space.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time, so I just got a couple of light things to wrap things
Yeah,
up.
go for it.
What's the best money you've ever spent on something in your music career? The best investment you've made?
In my music career, not business career as well, or not?
Anything, yeah, business or even music, you know.
Oh, mother of God. That's a really tough. Well, my team.
Sure, sure.
Like for me, like I've got like a team. So I've got like a team of like 20 people.
Yeah.
That was definitely the best money that I spent because it actually helped me build a business. But I'll tell you
Mm.
what, man, like education, like I've opted into a lot of programs.
Mm.
Books. I've bought a lot of books,
Yeah.
business books and stuff like that. I've gone on some really inspiring trips, which was just fun, like changed my life. Do you know what I mean? Like I went to New York in 2008, and
The pilgrimage.
yeah, like
Yeah.
New York 2008, and I went to, I was on a it was like a 2 week long course or something like that, and I did that, and it was just phenomenal. You know what I mean? And and stuff like that. Yeah. So I haven't really got one thing
Sure.
that sort of like jumps out, but generally, actually, it's more sort of like experiences and educational products for myself, whether it books or like in-person retreats and stuff like that. Yeah.
Totally.
Sort of like,
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah. It
What's
wasn't a pedal. It wasn't a bass pedal.
Sure, sure. Well, that leads me to my next question, or the last question rather. What's the worst money you've ever spent? Is there something that you regret investing in career wise, business wise, that was a mistake?
Well, yeah, but like I will say that I'm just sort of like a massive believer that like mistakes, like I make big mistakes all the time, but I don't really take them as like mistakes. I'm like, oh, that was a great learning, you know. And I know it sounds cheesy, but when you're making as many fucking mistakes as I'm making, you need to reframe the mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, I'll hate
Sure.
myself, you know, just because like the bigger the sort of like thing that you're working on, the bigger the mistakes are going to be. So I've made some like pretty colossal mistakes. And but I spent a lot of money on a coach once.
Right.
I spent a lot of money on a coach. I didn't really get that much from it. That was
Sure.
like, yeah, yeah. But I
Sure.
learned a lot.
Yeah, I like
learned
that.
a
I
lot.
like that. I think that really underlines a lot of the key to
Yeah.
your
And you don't know
success.
some of the time. You know what I mean? You don't know.
Exactly, exactly. And you just charge it to the game. It's like, all right, it's
Yeah.
part of the
It
process.
is exactly. It's part of the game. Yeah.
Look, man, thanks so much for joining me. It's great chatting with you, Scott. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You too, man. Thanks for having me be part of this. Yeah. Take it easy. Bye.